After 5 years of campaigning, they're tired and homesick. They're strangers in a strange land, surrounded by foreign customs. Even worse, Alexander begins to adopt some of these alien customs, and his men don't like it.
Alexander begins to enroll the Persians in his army. He begins to invite them to his court. And then he does the unthinkable. He starts to go native. He adopts their customs, he adopts their dress, and for the Macedonian soldier, this is entirely unacceptable. They didn't come here to become Persian, they came to conquer.
Alexander is going to have two reactions to the taking of Persia. First, it's going to validate his view that he's one of the great leaders of the world. On the other hand, the grumbling in the ranks of his men is going to enrage him. It's an insult to his narcissism.
Alexander still likes to model himself on the legendary warrior Achilles. And just as Achilles did, Alexander has a long-term male partner, Hephaestion. Part of the inner circle who feed Alexander's sense of self-importance.
Alexander really cultivates the cult of personality like never before. Just like today we have dictators promoting the cult of themselves, Lenin or Stalin or Saddam Hussein, Alexander promotes images of himself on statuary and coins. He becomes ubiquitous. He's really building this sense of he's greater than humans.
One of the other ways in which Alexander stamped his authority onto his empire was by founding and then naming cities after himself, the most famous of which is Alexandria. Yet by one count, Alexander may have named not just one city, but as many as 57 cities after himself, and another after his horse, and another one perhaps even after his dog. What this underlines is a similar type of behavior that also the dictators of Europe during the 20th century used. It underlines a need not just to stamp an authority onto the landscape, but a desire and a belief in oneself to stamp one's legend onto history for all time.
And the way to make history is to keep winning battles and expanding the empire. The troops may want to go home, but Alexander won't let them. He needs constant reinforcement of his desire for fame and glory.
Alexander wants to conquer the world because he needs to be special, the most powerful person in the world.
He's now so oblivious to those around him that he takes a Persian bride, unaware of how much it offends his soldiers.
Now, marrying a foreign bride, a Persian princess, is great politics for the Persians, but it outrages the troops. He is ruining his reputation with the Macedonians.
To make matters worse, Alexander orders his men, whenever in his presence, to perform proskynesis, the act of prostrating oneself in obedience. To the Greeks, it is an honor reserved only for the gods. If Alexander knows about the discontent, he shows no sign of caring. Soon, an assassination plot is in the wind.
A man called Philotas and his father Parmenio were accused of trying to assassinate Alexander. It was a serious charge, but the reason Alexander took it so seriously was that not long before, Philotas had bragged to Alexander that all his success in military campaigns was not due to his own genius, but to that of Parmenio, his general, Philotas' father. It was this insult to Alex's ability and success that made Alexander perhaps take the conspiracy theory so seriously.
Alexander decides to dispose of this little problem quickly.
He didn't wait for a trial to be conducted. He sent assassins to have Philotas and Parmenio murdered.
Parmenion has been Alexander's loyal lieutenant for many years. Alexander's ability to coldly murder him shows Alexander's underlying psychopathic behavior.
But it's just the beginning. Other assassins are lurking in the wings.
Just 2 years later, the same thing happened. A friend of Alexander overstepped the mark, was soon accused of trying to kill Alexander, and instead found himself dead.
Alexander grows increasingly more paranoid. The Great One is starting to lose it. Alexander turns to the bottle, again, with devastating consequences.
In yet another drinking bout with his companions, Alexander turns the conversation to his father Philip. Alexander laments the fact that Philip never recognized him for his achievements. Clitus, one of Alexander's generals, steps in and complains, "You have disowned your father. You say that you are the son of a god." Philip, anyways, is a better general than you ever would be. Enraged, Alexander steps up, grabs a spear, and runs through Clitus, killing him instantly.
According to the sources, Alexander is filled with remorse. He attempts to kill himself with a spear and has to be restrained.
Clitus was one of Alexander's oldest friends, contemplating suicide and withdrawing to his tent for 3 days. Could have just been a clever dramatization, something to satisfy the troops. But this seems to be something that's felt. There's regret. This is a crime of passion and exasperation brought about by intoxication.
Now the assassination plots come fast and furiously. Alexander's world is unraveling, and his grip on power is slipping through his hands. Things are getting tough for Alexander. Tensions continue to rise in his troops, and his relentless progress eastward slows to a crawl. By the time Alexander reaches the border of India, his empire is 9,000 miles across. He resorts to massacring whole town garrisons, reneging on promises that they will survive if they surrender. Alexander wants to keep pushing east, but after an epic battle at the Hydaspes River, his troops finally rebel.
Alexander's men are tired of being away from their homes and families for more than 8 years. They are also increasingly fed up with Alexander's dictatorial style of leadership, so much like that of the Persian king which he had replaced. And on that note, they had come into Asia to avenge the Persian king's wrongs that he had done to Macedon. They had now done that, so what were they still doing here, except for adding to Alexander's own empire and getting nothing for themselves in return?
It's become pretty obvious to Alexander's men that he's never going to stop. He's just going to keep on going until there's no more world to conquer. And that was never part of the deal. But of course this creates a huge problem for Alexander, because he can't be seen to back down in the face of his men, but at the same time he can't keep going without the support of his men, and he knows it.
Alexander's commanders finally devise a plan to end the continuous campaigns. They pretend they receive a divine omen ordering them to stop fighting and head home.
This is a fascinating psychological event. The army's tired, they want to go home. Alexander wants to press on and conquer the world. They need a mechanism that will both preserve the army and not injure Alexander's narcissism. The divine omen is the perfect face-saving device.
Alexander agrees to turn back, but he doesn't make it easy. Instead of following a route along the coast, he insists on going west across the Gedrossian Desert in what is now southern Iran. It is one of the most forbidding places on Earth. Scorching heat and shin-deep sand. There's not enough water and soon no food. The men eat their own horses and continue on foot.
Why should Alexander choose to cross this inhospitable desert, especially when he could have simply put his men on ships and sailed them most of the way home? Now some say it's because he wanted to punish his men for having refused to follow him any further east. His men paid for their lack of loyalty with their lives.
25,000 men, more than 3/4 of Alexander's force, die in the desert. By the time he returns to Persia, Alexander is a far harsher ruler. He accuses some governors of crimes in his absence.